Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to look at launching sub-activities. So a sub-activity is where you launch another activity and then that activity somehow quits and you come back to the original activity that you were in. And the motivation for this is that I thought it would be good to add to my Note Squirrel application the facility for taking a photograph and then using that photograph as the image in my application. So we're actually going to work towards using the camera and taking photographs, but there are a few more things that we need to know before we can do that, and we're going to look at one of them in this tutorial. So I've created a new project here because I thought it would be simpler to look at this in the context of a few simple example projects. And what this does is it's got two activities, just two, first and other. And what they look like is they both look like this, except that, well, they've both got text areas and they've both got buttons at the bottom. And the only difference is that one says main activity and the other says other activity, and the text on the button is different too. And what I want to do is I want to make it so that when I click this button in this main activity, it launches the other activity, and then in the other activity there'll be a button called quit, and I'll click that button and I'll come back to this activity. So the stuff in this application at the moment is all stuff that we've seen before. There's absolutely nothing new, and I'm going to just add a few bits to this to make the activity related stuff work. So in first activity here, I've got a button, I've got a handler, a click handler for that button, and I'm going to create an intent here that can launch the other activity. So I'll say intent I equals new intent, and I'll pass it this and other activity.class. And of course this is stuff that we've seen already now several times. And I'm going to start that activity. Let's just add the input there, Control-Shift-O. And I'm not sure what the problem is there. Oh yeah, I've got to say here, instead of this, I need to say first activity.this, because I'm in an anonymous class here. I'm in the click handler. So normally, just to launch another activity, I'd call start activity. But instead of that, because I want to come back to this activity, I'm going to call start activity for result, and I'll pass it the intent there. And now I need to pass in a code that's going to identify the activity that I'm starting within this activity. So let's add here a private static final int, and I'll call it other activity. And I'll set that equal to, well, I could give it any number I like really. Let's just give it 7 completely arbitrarily. And now I need to pass that code to this other activity, and you'll see why that's useful in a moment. Sorry, I'm not passing it to the other activity, I'm just supplying it to start activity for result. So I type other activity here, and there we go. So the point is really, this is exactly the same as start activity. The only difference is you supply a number, which is then going to enable you to identify which activity you returned from. Now the next thing here is I need to override a method of this activity. So I'm going to right click, go to source, override implement methods, and the one I want to override is let's have a look on it's called, one second, on activity result. There it is. I actually completely forgot and had to go away and look it up, but here we are on activity result. So I'm going to override that method, and what will happen is so I'm going to launch this activity here, and that is then going to quit by a mechanism that I'll create in a minute. And when that quits, I'm gonna land in this method here, and in this method I'm going to say let's say switch request code. So I've got this parameter here, request code, and I'm going to switch on it. And in fact, that request code is this that I supplied when I called start activity before result. So I'm going to say case other activity, which was the request code I supplied. And then we can say action as appropriate. And what the appropriate action might be in this sample activity. Having trouble typing a semicolon there. There we go. I'm not sure, but let's just, so we can see something happening, let's say toast.make text this returned, I'm going to say returned with result code. I'm going to add on this other parameter, result code, and we'll see that in a second. I'll say toast.length long and .show, and there we go. So when this method is called onActivityResult, I'll get a request code which will be this code here, and that enables me to tell which activity I return from, because of course we might start several different sub-activities in different places, and when you land up here you want to know which one of those sub-activities you come back from, and that's what the request code here is for. Now the sub-activity itself can supply you a result code, and that's going to come in here, and we'll see how to get the sub-activity to return a result code in just a second. So all I'll do now is just display this toast when we return back to the first activity here. Now in other activity here, that has a quit button, and in a quit button I'm just going to call finish to finish the activity. And to set the result code that I return, I'm going to call set result and supply it with a code here. So let's supply it with, we could use some predefined code here. Let's say in fact result OK, and whatever that is, in fact it has the value -1 by the looks of it, so that will do. And now finally I can run my application. So what's going to happen is, just to very quickly recap, when we click the button in this activity, we'll start the sub-activity and supply it this request code. Then when we quit the other activity by clicking the button, we'll set the result code, we'll finish the activity, and we'll land up back here. And this request code will be this that I supplied when I started the activity, and the result code here, which we're going to display in the toast, will be this code here, result OK, that I supply when I quit the activity. Let's just try that. So I click launch other activity. Here's my other activity, which looks basically the same, but it could be something completely different, like for example taking a photograph using a camera activity. And then finally I'm going to quit here, which will set the code, the return code, and it will call finish, and I'll go back to my main activity and we will return with result code, which is this code here. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial, and we're going to move on bit by bit to using this sub-activity thing to launch a sub-activity that takes a photo. But that's it for this tutorial, and this is just something very, very, very useful that you'll want to use in a lot of different circumstances. So until next time, happy coding.